Hi everyone, it's Wendy. I've spent the morning working on my blog post, but I thought I would shoot a video just because of the content of what I was writing about. Like everybody else, I'm shocked to hear that Anthony Bourdain was found dead this morning by suicide. I think that the second visible public person to have this happen in a week is just shocking to everybody. We're still trying to understand why somebody as brilliant and talented as Kate Spade could have something like this happen and choose this. I think while many of us are trying to understand this, it really does bring into context that the visibility and making of successes of our lives does not negate the fact that many people still struggle with the inner workings of their world, regardless of how much success they have. I have felt this very deeply this week because of being empathic. I've seen myself slow down and the energy around all of this because I can feel the despair people are having. I think the thing is that the vulnerability that we see in public eye, especially because of being so visible, can be very challenging, but it's also very challenging for us personally, even if we've never had that level of success. And I do think that this is a conversation that I wanted to pick up at this point. I see a lot of people talking about resources for suicide prevention, but what about for the rest of us that maybe are just trying to function? We're not going into those deep spaces, but we definitely can see that there's some cracks in our foundations of how we've been living. And it's maybe time to start talking about how do we manage what's going on. We're living at a time where we are truly seeing a shift around the values of these unspoken challenges that people have been experiencing in our human condition. And I think we're moving into an awareness that we have choices. However, these choices need to be understood from the context that we can keep living reactively at the effect of life, or we can start choosing to create change and awareness at the cause of the experience of living. And I'll say that again. So we can move actively, or we can keep living reactively at the effect of life, or start creating change and awareness at the cause of the experience of living. So what I'm proposing is that for all of us who function but want to be more aware and understand how to help ourselves and others around us, is that we take a little bit of time and propose to do a radical self-inquiry. This is not meant for people who are dealing with mental health issues and distress. That is definitely something that there's better people that are meant out there to help. And it's not meant to say that people need to go into therapy. I mean, I'm a proponent of therapists. That's how I started my career. However, I do think this is meant to be a required exercise in understanding our experiences in this humanness of life. That people can become distressed over change at the best of times. And what we're seeing now is that how do we embrace change during the times of such deep disturbances that we are experiencing right now? And I think it's through radical self-inquiry. We have got to slow down and actually look inward to the agreements that we've made with ourselves about the world as we know it. Our external world is showing these cracks in its foundations, and we can't shut our eyes anymore to it. We cannot sit back anymore and say that's not us. We can't live in a me culture that most of us were raised in, because we have to come to terms that I am like them and we are more alike than not. And so where does that leave most of us? Many people, in my experience, are walking around, no fault of their own, but they're just in a lack of awareness that they're living by default, that they're assuming the ideologies of their past is the experiences that they must create for their future without really challenging why. And truth be told, many of us have no idea what we believe, what drives our behaviors, or who we are at the core. And I truly believe that is the gift of life. That is what we are here to do, is experience life from a completely expressive place, not one from a lack of. Many of us are operating out of outdated software given to us as children, and that child within is often making the decisions about our lives from a place of unworthiness, unloved, and not valued. And all of this is a basis of fear. So we're making a lot of decisions out of fear. And at some point, we have to stop handing the keys to our lives over to this inner child in our little inner self that is so afraid about failure and so afraid of not being loved. Because the truth is, they're not understanding how to read the signs of life as being an adult. And so what they're doing is we're taking ourselves off our journeys, and we're making it harder for ourselves by deviating from this course that we've created. I mean, we must stop and love ourselves, love this inner child with deep compassion. If we can have compassion for people whose stories that have obvious successes in life, then we must stop and give compassion to ourselves. We must stop and in our mind's eye just understand that our inner child cannot continue to operate from that mindset when we get older, because it doesn't make sense. The actions don't make sense to the behavior of where we're at in our lives. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm sure you can recall a number of times where you're like, man, I don't understand why I'm reacting this way, or why somebody else is reacting this way. It's so out of context of what this scenario really is. And so I'm recommending that some of us just step back in our mind's eye, love this child that's within, but put them in their child seat. Put the seatbelt on, take the keys away, get back on the road, and understand that we've got to start interpreting and reading the signs better. That while many of us understand that there are so many places that we could go that are deep and dark, and can't say that I will ever understand the choices for somebody to take death over life. I've never been in that kind of despair. But I do believe that there is something we can learn from having this level of compassion for people and mindfulness towards their well-being that we can assert to ourselves. It's showing us how to care for others, but it's also teaching us that we need to stop and review how things are for ourselves. We must be mindful of our own lives, be compassionate towards our own story, and be willing to drop this veil of shame. In order to fulfill our desires of having an expressed life filled with joy and love and happiness, we have to challenge the beliefs that we have accepted as truths, because they may not be truths any longer for our lives. We have to understand if it's time to let some of this go and reconnect with who we are now at our core self and ask better questions of our lives. I think that we need to, if we can learn to lean in deeply, and there are a lot of resources out there, but I think right now, without making this complex, this doesn't have to be complicated and hard. You don't need to study, you don't have to, but what I do ask is that maybe you ask some better questions by being quiet and standing still or getting into a quiet space, and consider, what do you believe about the world and who gave you those beliefs? What do you value and what are your values? Because how are they changing over your lifetime? What kind of life do you want to have? And what agreements would you have to let go of to have them? And of course, the biggest one is, what kind of adult do you want to be, and where can you course correct your life right now? Recently, I learned a wonderful approach to sitting still and being quiet, and that was that prayer is our ability to ask for guidance, where meditation is the way of receiving the guidance from within. So I'm encouraging people to stop and just be mindful and be kind and compassionate to themselves first, while we are very aware and hypervigilant of taking care of others. What I know is that after years of coaching with people around personal development, awareness, entrepreneurial startup, at the end of the day, we're all people. And that there are a couple of truths that I have seen do really exist. And the first one is, success is an inside job. No amount of money will create the safety, the value, the happiness that most of us are craving in our lives. Money only magnifies the things in us that already exist. And so, to not sound crass, if you were a jerk before when you were broke, you are going to be a bigger jerk when you're rich and you believe you have more power over others. If you were gracious when you were poor, you will relish with the gratitude that your ability now to have to help more people philanthropically when you're wealthy will only expand your ability to help more people. So it is our inner character that determines the quality of our lives and subsequently then allows us to experience happiness and joy. It is not basis of money. Money only brings us the opportunity to express it, but what we're expressing will always go back to our core self. The second truth is this: we are all afraid. Hands down, we're all afraid. We have these fears that touch in every corner of every culture. We're afraid of losing money and being penniless and homeless. We are all afraid of disappointing people who believe in us. We are afraid of not being lovable and being loved. We are afraid of humiliation and judgment of others. We are afraid of being left alone and not safe. We feel this, but this is normal. Everybody has these feelings. And I talk about this with my clients in my boot camps and my one-on-one, because what happens is we must normalize this experience that we are all afraid. If we don't normalize it, then we sit around and judge ourselves so harshly that we are not good enough, that we're not enough. And I can't stand watching that, because this is experienced in every culture on every corner of this planet. It's also a key indicator of where we need to challenge ourselves to explore first in our lives. Because if you can't move out of your fears and ask to reach out for help at this, then we have no way of ever removing this veil of shame. It's what keeps us small, it keeps us stuck, it keeps us in inertia. So I am proposing that we become healthy in our awareness and still exist in this dysfunction. As in business, dysfunction is defined by the challenges and changes that are always existing, but we must be adapting to. We cannot operate without it. It is something that is necessary. It inspires innovation. It inspires us to look for other ways of operating. And sometimes talking from an emotional place is not always the favorite place to be when we're talking about business. But the truth is, I'm hearing it more and more, and I'm going to share it more and more this way. So I'm going to reframe the truth that we are uniquely all here in this space together. And that if we can, again, be healthy in our awareness of who we are and how we relate to others, that then this dysfunction that we're living in, we can tolerate, we can learn to, as I lovingly have heard it said recently, we can learn to stand still while our hair is on fire. And that is this place where we can be in ownership of who we are by understanding that we can create our experience from the cause instead of being reactive to the effect. I just wanted to share a couple of these ideas with you today because I am so heartsick and so saddened by all this news that I think that while most of us can feel it, it's giving us an opportunity to have a new conversation. And I wanted to put this conversation out there because I do this work all the time. This is the conversations I have, is to go into working with people. How do we bring the best out in them without overwhelming them, without creating more damage or trauma, or coming from a place of lack and fear? The opportunity of possibility is a place where we can all create together, but it starts with the first idea that our oneness is actually our collectiveness. So I wish everybody well today. I wish everybody some quiet space to reflect on what's been going on, and I want to send love and blessings to everybody who watches this. Thank you.